everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to take a really deep dive into the state of men and boys in America. And we've got a white paper here, like totally packed with research, a whole bunch of references.
Yeah.
But what we really want to do today is go beyond just kind of the surface level, throwing stats at you.
Right.
And trying to understand like the why behind all of this. What are the trends and what do they actually mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
For us, for society at large.
I think what's so fascinating about this topic is that we are really digging into the cultural and societal forces that are like shaping the experiences of men and boys today.
Right.
And that's where I think the real insights are.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the first things that really jumped out at me in this white paper was this concept of deaths of despair.
Yeah.
Which, that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it is. It's a really, I guess stark way of putting it. It refers to the rise in deaths among men, particularly middle-aged white men, due to things like suicide, drug overdoses, and alcohol-related illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
The white paper really digs into the opioid epidemic particularly.
Yeah, and it's heavy stuff for sure. And I think it's even more concerning when you look at the CDC statistic that nearly 80% of suicides in the US are men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really points to a deeper issue. And the research suggests that societal expectations of stoicism and self-reliance may be preventing men from actually seeking help when they need it most.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's this unwritten rule that men should just handle their problems on their own.
Right.
Which can be incredibly isolating.
Yeah, it's almost like they're trapped in a way.
Right.
Unable to kind of express what they're going through, ask for help.
Right. And that can, obviously have some devastating consequences.
Right.
The research shows that bottled up emotional distress, it's a huge contributing factor to those deaths of despair we were talking about. And so, men might be turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse.
Okay.
Because they don't feel comfortable, seeking support in healthier ways.
It makes you wonder, is it just about men needing to man up and seek help? Or is there something a little more, systemic at play here?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The white paper really argues that, it's not just about individual choices, right?
Right.
It's also about recognizing the societal structures.
Okay.
And these cultural norms.
Yeah.
That are actually contributing to this crisis.
So what are some of those structures and norms?
Well, the white paper points to the decline of traditional community spaces.
Okay.
Right. And the rise of kind of virtual communication as potential factors. So men may be losing out on those opportunities for face-to-face interaction.
Okay.
And the social support.
Yeah.
That were once much more readily available.
I see.
So think about it. The decline of things like, bowling leagues, social clubs, even just hanging out at the bar after work.
Right.
Those spaces are kind of disappearing.
Yeah.
And that loss of community connection can really, I think, have a huge impact.
Especially for men.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you kind of layer on top of that the economic anxieties.
Oh, yeah.
That I think a lot of men are facing, especially those without, college degrees.
Absolutely. I mean, the white paper really details how automation and globalization have led to job losses in, traditionally male-dominated industries.
Yeah.
Like manufacturing, construction. Right. And so many men are really struggling to find new jobs that pay a living wage.
Yeah.
And that economic instability, that can exacerbate feelings of isolation, hopelessness.
Right.
And it bleeds into their relationships, family dynamics.
Totally. It all kind of snowballs.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So this brings us to another big issue that the white paper highlighted, and that is the growing epidemic of loneliness among men, which, was a bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah.
You would think with all the ways we have to connect now online, loneliness wouldn't be such a huge problem.
Right.
But the research is suggesting that men are more likely than women to report feeling lonely, especially as they get older.
Yeah.
So why is that?
Well, it's really interesting. It's a very counterintuitive kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You would think, like you said, with social media and everything, we'd be more connected than ever.
Right.
But the research suggests that men actually form friendships very differently than women.
Okay.
They may have plenty of casual acquaintances.
Right.
but fewer close, emotionally intimate relationships.
Gotcha.
Where they feel like they can really open up and share their feelings.
So is that going back to the societal norms we were discussing?
Exactly.
Like the whole strong and silent type?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Men are often taught to just suppress their emotions.
Right.
Right? Be the rock, the provider, the one who doesn't complain.
Yeah.
And that can make it really difficult to truly open up and connect with other people on a deeper level.
So they might have a lot of, quote unquote friends on Facebook,
right,
but feel really lonely in their actual lives.
Exactly. And that loneliness, it's not just, an emotional issue.
Right.
It's actually a public health crisis.
Really?
Yeah. The research has linked loneliness to a higher risk of depression, anxiety, heart disease.
Wow.
Even premature death.
That's huge.
It is. It's as detrimental to your health as things like smoking or obesity.
So it really is like a silent epidemic almost.
It is.
This kind of undercurrent of loneliness affecting men, across all age groups, really.
Yeah, and it's definitely something we need to start talking about.
Yeah.
Much more openly and honestly.
Absolutely. And while we are talking about breaking down stereotypes, we need to address another surprising finding in the white paper, and that's the education gap. I always thought girls were the ones falling behind, especially in the STEM fields.
Yeah.
But it turns out that's not the whole story.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Yeah.
The reality is that boys are actually lagging behind girls.
Okay.
Academically, even in math and science.
Wow.
And this isn't a new trend. It's been happening for decades.
Okay, so what's going on here? Why are boys struggling?
Well, it's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
But the white paper highlights a few potential factors.
Okay.
One is that boys may have different learning styles.
Gotcha.
They may thrive in environments that are more hands-on, kinesthetic.
Okay.
So traditional classrooms with their emphasis on sitting still, listening.
Right.
They might not be the best fit.
Right.
For many boys.
I can see that. I feel like boys often have a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Need to move around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the research also suggests that, boys are much more likely to be diagnosed with learning disabilities.
Okay.
Like ADHD.
Yeah.
And they tend to receive more disciplinary actions in school.
Oh, so it's almost like a double whammy.
Yeah.
You've got these boys who are maybe struggling academically.
Right.
Then they're getting punished for their behavior, which just reinforces this idea that school isn't really for them.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And it's particularly concerning, I think, when you consider that only about 24% of teachers are men.
Oh, wow. That's a striking statistic. So these boys are going through these really crucial, developmental years without a lot of male role models in the classroom.
Right. It makes you wonder, if having more male teachers, especially in elementary school, could make a real difference.
Right, right.
It might help boys feel more seen, understood, and maybe even spark their interest in learning.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Boys might relate better to male teachers.
Yep.
Especially when it comes to things like reading and writing, which are often perceived as more feminine subjects.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the white paper, it really emphasizes that this lack of male educators is particularly concerning for boys from, low-income and minority backgrounds.
Yeah.
Who may already face a lot of disadvantages in the education system.
Right.
And they might not have those positive male role models at home either.
Yeah.
So that lack of positive influence can have ripple effects that go way beyond just the classroom.
Absolutely, yeah. Impacting their self-esteem, academic performance, career aspirations, even, relationships later in life.
For sure. It's clear that there are some really serious challenges facing men and boys today. But, the good news is the white paper, it actually highlights a lot of really incredible work that's being done.
Okay.
By people and organizations out there.
Okay, I'm ready for some good news.
Yeah, right.
So what are some of the programs that are showing some real promise?
Well, one that really caught my eye was HEAL Hawaii.
Okay.
Which stands for Healthy, Empowered, and Active Living.
Okay.
And it's a community-based program that's really focused on men's mental, emotional, social well-being.
So is it Is it basically like, getting guys together to talk about their feelings?
That's part of it, but it's actually, they take a much more holistic approach.
Yeah.
So they integrate physical activity, emotional resilience training, and even cultural education into the program.
Oh, that's really interesting. Like, how does the cultural element kind of tie into all of this?
Well, it's about recognizing that different communities have different needs.
Okay.
And different, like, cultural sensitivities. So, for example, in Hawaii,
Okay.
Native Hawaiian men face some really unique challenges related to, like, historical trauma, cultural displacement.
Right.
And so HEAL Hawaii, they actually tailor their approach
Oh, okay.
to be culturally relevant and sensitive to the specific needs
Right.
of the community they serve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just, you can't just apply a one-size-fits-all solution to such a, complex issue.
Right.
So how effective has it been? Like, are they seeing positive results?
Yeah, the research is actually really encouraging.
Okay.
So HEAL Hawaii has been shown to, like, significantly reduce feelings of isolation.
Gotcha.
It improves mental health outcomes.
Okay.
And really empowers men to, take a more active role in their own well-being.
Right.
They've also seen a lot of success in helping men build stronger connections
Okay.
with their families, their communities.
That's fantastic. It sounds like a model that could be replicated in other communities.
I think it definitely has the potential to be a blueprint
Yeah.
for similar programs across the country.
Right.
And speaking of models, the white paper also talks about the work of Richard Reeves,
Yes.
who's a scholar at the Brookings Institution. Okay.
And he's been a really vocal advocate
Right.
for boys and men.
Yes, I've heard of him. He wrote that book of Boys and Men.
He did, yes.
Yeah.
It's a really thought-provoking read.
Yeah.
And Reeves, he's done extensive research on the challenges facing men and boys, and he's a huge proponent of evidence-based solutions,
Okay.
particularly in the education system.
So what are some of the solutions that, he proposes?
Well, one of his key recommendations is to encourage more men to actually become teachers,
Okay.
especially at the elementary school level.
Okay.
He argues that having more male role models in the classroom
Right.
could make a huge difference for boys, particularly for boys who, don't have those positive male influences
Right. Yeah.
at home.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it's not just about having, men in the classroom, right?
No.
It's also about challenging those traditional teaching methods that may not be engaging for all boys. Reeves actually advocates for more hands-on experiential learning approaches
Okay.
that really caters to different learning styles.
Yeah.
He's also a big proponent of restorative justice practices,
Okay.
which focus on repairing harm, building relationships,
Right.
rather than just relying on punishment.
Okay, those sound like really promising approaches. So is there any evidence that these ideas are actually being put into practice?
Yes, some schools have actually started to adopt Reeves's recommendations,
Okay.
and they are seeing some really positive results.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so they're reporting, improved academic outcomes for boys, reduced disciplinary problems, and, overall just a more inclusive and engaging learning environment.
For all students?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Are there any other initiatives that are making a difference, especially for boys from disadvantaged backgrounds?
Oh, absolutely. The white paper talks about the My Brother's Keeper Alliance,
Okay.
or MBK. And it was actually launched during the Obama administration.
Okay.
And it really focuses on addressing opportunity gaps
Okay.
for boys and young men of color.
So it's about leveling the playing field, giving these young men the tools they need to succeed.
Exactly. So MBK, they provide things like mentorship, educational resources, job training, support services.
Okay.
All to help young men kind of overcome those systemic barriers and reach their full potential.
That's great.
Yeah, and they've actually partnered with schools, community organizations, businesses.
Oh, wow.
To create a real network of support.
Yeah.
That kind of wraps around these young men.
That's amazing. It sounds like mentorship is a key element in a lot of these successful programs.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, having that positive male role model can be so transformative for a young man.
Right.
Especially if he's lacking that kind of guidance, that support in his life. It's about showing him what's possible, helping him navigate challenges, encouraging him to believe in himself.
Yeah, it's not just about helping boys avoid negative outcomes. It's about empowering them to thrive, really.
Exactly. And while we've been, really focusing on younger men, the white paper also mentions some really interesting programs
Okay.
that are making a difference for older men,
Okay.
particularly those facing the challenges of like retirement.
Yeah, that's such an important point because retirement can be such a huge transition for men.
It can.
You know, especially if they've kind of defined themselves by their work for so long.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it could be a real struggle, especially for men who haven't really developed like, strong social connections.
Yeah.
Outside of work, right?
Right.
And then suddenly they're faced with like a loss of identity, purpose, social interaction.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
Yeah. So what are some of the programs that are like, helping older men kind of navigate that transition?
Well, the white paper really highlights the importance of community-based programs
Okay.
that offer like social engagement opportunities,
Okay.
volunteer work,
Gotcha.
even mentorship roles for older men.
I like that.
Yeah, it's about helping them find new ways to connect, contribute, and feel valued
Right.
in this new chapter of their lives.
Yeah, it's almost like, redefining what it means to be a man
Right?
in those like later years.
Yeah, and it's recognizing that men can continue to grow and learn and make meaningful contributions
Right.
to society.
Yeah.
Even after they retire from like, their traditional careers.
Totally.
I mean, they have so much knowledge and experience to share, and they can play such a vital role in mentoring, the younger generations.
Yeah, I love these examples. Like, I feel like we've really shifted from like a place of like, doom and gloom to like a sense of hope and possibility.
I agree. I think it's really empowering to realize that like there are solutions out there.
Yeah.
That people are actively working to make a difference
Yeah.
in the lives of, men and boys.
Yeah, but it's not just about individual programs, right?
Right.
There needs to be like a broader like societal shift
Absolutely.
to really address these issues, at their root.
And the white paper actually calls for the creation of a commission on boys and men,
Okay.
which would be like a dedicated federal body
Oh, okay.
to really study these issues,
Gotcha.
identify best practices,
Yeah.
and coordinate efforts
Okay.
across, different agencies.
So it's about having like a national strategy,
Yeah.
like a comprehensive plan to address these challenges.
Exactly.
So what would that like look like in practice?
Well, I think one area that definitely needs more attention is, funding.
Okay.
The government really needs to allocate adequate resources to support research, program development, and, the implementation of those evidence-based solutions we've been talking about.
It's about putting your money where your mouth is.
It is.
Like, backing those words with action.
Yeah, and it can't just be, a top-down approach.
Right.
There needs to be buy-in
Yeah.
from communities,
Yeah.
from families, from individuals.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all have a role to play in creating a more supportive and inclusive environment
We do.
for, men and boys.
I think it really starts with like challenging those harmful stereotypes
Right?
about masculinity
Yeah.
that really limit men's choices and prevent them from, seeking help
Right.
when they need it.
Yeah. It's like we need to stop telling boys to, man up and instead like encourage them to be their authentic selves.
Exactly.
Express their emotions,
Yeah.
ask for help when they're struggling.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, what are some other ways that we can like contribute to this, shift in thinking?
Well, for starters, we can support organizations that are doing great work in this area. So, volunteering our time, donating to their cause, spreading the word about their mission.
Right.
I mean, those are all really meaningful ways to make a difference.
Yeah. And even just being more mindful, I think, of the language that we use.
Yes.
Avoiding those like dismissive or derogatory comments
Totally.
about, men and boys.
It's about creating a culture of respect and understanding
Right.
where men and boys feel seen, heard, and valued.
Yeah, I love that. It's about like creating a world where everyone like feels empowered to thrive,
Exactly.
regardless of gender.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And, I think we still have a long way to go.
Right.
But it is really inspiring to see like the progress that's being made.
Yeah.
There's a growing awareness of these issues.
Yeah.
And a real willingness to address them head on.
And this deep dive has certainly like, expanded my understanding of the challenges, but also like the opportunities.
Yeah.
I'm like feeling really hopeful about the future.
Me too. I think we're at a real turning point.
Yeah.
And, I think with continued effort and commitment,
Yeah.
we can create a much healthier, more equitable society for everyone.
Before we wrap up, I'm like really curious to kind of explore what this like healthier society would actually look like.
Yeah.
Especially for, men and boys.
Right.
What concrete changes would we see in their lives?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think one that deserves a lot more exploration.
Oh.
So I think, what, let's delve into that in the final part of our deep dive, where we really kind of paint a picture of a more inclusive future.
I like it.
For men and boys.
Awesome.
And for everyone, really.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into the state of men and boys in America.
Yeah.
We've, really spent some time talking about the challenges they're facing, but we've also, I think, uncovered some, truly inspiring solutions, programs that are making a real difference. So now I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and think about, okay, if we could wave a magic wand, what would a truly healthier, more inclusive society look like for, men and boys?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think I envision a society where every individual, regardless of gender, really has the space and support to thrive.
Okay.
And that means, really dismantling those systemic barriers that hold men and boys back, while also recognizing that, true equality benefits everybody.
So it's not about creating this men versus women situation. It's about recognizing that everyone benefits when we support each other.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about understanding that the well-being of men and boys is really deeply intertwined with the well-being of women and girls and society as a whole.
Right.
So when we lift each other up, we all rise together.
I love that. Okay, so let's get specific. When it comes to mental health, for example.
Yeah.
What would this ideal scenario look like?
Imagine a world where mental health is given the same weight as physical health.
Right.
Where seeking help is seen as a sign of strength and self-awareness, not weakness.
Right.
And where men and boys really feel comfortable expressing their emotions, asking for support, without that fear of judgment.
That would be huge.
It would.
But it would also require a pretty massive shift in how we, view mental health.
Absolutely.
Especially for men.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin to tackle that?
Well, I think it starts with challenging those, really deep-seated cultural norms that equate masculinity with stoicism.
Right.
And self-reliance. We need to start having those really open and honest conversations about mental health.
Yeah.
Making it clear that it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
And that asking for help is actually a sign of courage, not weakness.
Right. So it's about creating this culture where vulnerability is seen as a strength, not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Okay. What about access to mental health resources? Yeah. Would that look different in this, kind of ideal world?
Oh, absolutely. Ideally, mental health services would be readily available and accessible to everyone.
Okay.
Regardless of their income or, their insurance status.
Right.
And we'd see mental health resources integrated into schools, workplaces, community centers.
Right.
Making it much easier for men and boys to get that support that they need without, the stigma or the shame.
Yeah, if we want people to prioritize their mental health, we need to make those resources accessible and affordable.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay. What about education? What changes would we see in an ideal educational system that really supports boys?
Well, I think we would see a system that really embraces the unique needs of all learners, including boys. So this would involve, moving away from that kind of traditional one-size-fits-all approach to teaching, and really putting more of an emphasis on personalized learning.
Okay.
So imagine classrooms that incorporate, different teaching methods that cater to various learning styles.
And we've talked about the importance of having, more male educators, especially in, those early grades.
Yeah.
Would that be a key part of this ideal system?
I think it would be. Having more male teachers, especially in those elementary, middle school years, could really, really make a world of difference for boys.
Right.
Not only would it provide them with, those positive male role models, but it could also help, challenge those gender stereotypes that often discourage boys from pursuing certain subjects or careers.
Right. And it's not just about like the number of male teachers, right? It's also about like making sure those teachers are, well equipped to really understand and support the specific needs of boys.
Exactly. It's about providing teachers with those professional development opportunities that really focus on boys' learning styles, their social emotional development, and the unique challenges they may face.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about economics, which is obviously, very closely tied to education.
Yeah.
What would a more supportive economic landscape look like for men, especially in this rapidly changing, world that we live in?
Well, I think we would see an economy that prioritizes investment in workforce development programs. Particularly for men who have been kind of displaced from those traditional industries.
Right.
So these programs would really provide men with the skills and training they need to succeed in those emerging fields, giving them a path to, good paying jobs.
Yeah.
And that sense of purpose.
Right. So it's about equipping men with the tools they need to adapt and thrive, right?
Yeah.
In this new economy rather than just kind of leaving them behind.
Absolutely. And it's also about addressing those systemic barriers that often, prevent men from fully participating in the workforce.
Right.
Things like lack of affordable childcare or transportation.
It's about creating this environment where men have the support.
They do.
They need to succeed.
Yeah.
Both at work and at home.
Absolutely. And I think we would also see a real shift away from those, rigid gender stereotypes that limit men's career choices.
Okay.
Right. So imagine a world where men actually feel empowered to pursue careers in those, quote unquote, female fields.
Right.
Like nursing, teaching, social work, without feeling like they're compromising their masculinity.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that those caregiving and nurturing professions are just as valuable as those that are typically associated with, with masculinity.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to families and relationships. Yeah. How would those look different in this kind of, healthier, more inclusive society that we're envisioning?
Well, I think we'd see a real move away from that outdated, breadwinner homemaker model.
Right.
And a greater emphasis on shared responsibilities within families.
Okay.
So imagine a world where fathers are actively involved in childcare and housework.
Right.
Where they're present and engaged in their children's lives.
So it's about creating a more equitable and fulfilling partnership.
It is.
Between men and women where both partners feel, supported and valued.
Absolutely. And it's also about recognizing that those healthy, supportive relationships are essential for everyone's well-being.
Totally.
Regardless of gender.
Okay, so I love this vision of, a brighter future, but it feels like a really big lift.
It can.
How do we even begin to make these changes happen? It's almost, it can feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming. But I think, it's important to remember that even those small actions can have a real ripple effect.
Right.
I think it really starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to keep having these conversations, educating ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And challenging those outdated norms and expectations that are really, holding us back.
So it's about starting those conversations.
It is.
Even if they are uncomfortable at times.
Exactly. And it's about taking action, supporting those organizations, doing great work.
Yeah.
Advocating for policy changes.
Right.
And even just checking in on the men in our lives. Yeah. Those small acts of kindness and support can make a world of difference.
Yeah. It's about remembering that, we're all in this together.
We are.
The well-being of, men and boys is intertwined with the well-being of, women and girls and society as a whole.
Absolutely. And, I think by working together, supporting each other and challenging those, those harmful stereotypes, we can really create a world where everyone, regardless of their gender, has the opportunity to thrive.
Well, this deep dive has been honestly, truly eye-opening.
Yeah.
We've covered, a lot of ground today, from the depths of those challenges to the heights of, hope and possibility.
Yeah.
I'm walking away with a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to, like, really being part of the solution.
Yeah, and I think, it's been a real privilege to kind of explore this topic with you.
Likewise.
And remember, this conversation doesn't have to end here.
Right.
I mean, to take what you've learned, share it with others, and let's keep working together.
Yeah.
To create that healthier, more inclusive future for everyone.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we will see you next time.